Here we go, Dina.
Hey, hi everyone. We're very lucky to be chatting a bit with Judge Ruchie Freier. For those of you that have been on early, you've caught snippets of our conversation. Daminyan is very excited to be partnering this morning with Chabad Glen Eira and Chabad Malvern, and we are so excited to welcome Judge Ruchie Freier. You know, I've heard lots of different snippets and catchphrases about Judge Ruchie Freier, phrases such as one of the 50 most influential women in the world and Hasidic Superwoman of the night courts, the first Hasidic woman to hold public office in the United States, mother of 6, grandmother a few times over, licensed EMT. But it was actually more recently when I listened to a podcast of an interview with Judge Freier, and I saw a woman that was brave, courageous, inspiring, someone that I really would love to emulate in my life. And Ruchie is a woman who really exemplifies standing strong, standing out, remaining true to her identity and her passion without compromising on her values. And I am so excited to hear Judge Freier speak this morning. We're going to hear Judge Freier speak, and then we're going to open to question and answer so people can pop questions in the chat, and we'll try to cover all the questions. I'm sure there will be many. And without further ado, over to you, Judge Freier.
Thank you so much. I will say Shavua Tov, because for me here, it's Moshe Shabbat. Shabbat just ended less than an hour ago. And thank you so much for inviting me. I've never been to Australia yet, so I feel so happy to be in Australia now. I hope one day to get there in person. And I'd like to start off by saying that many of us come from different backgrounds, and we have different customs, different traditions. And what I've learned in my travels and speaking in different communities is that by the time I finish speaking, we will see that we have so much more in common that binds us than what actually divides us. So I want to start off speaking a little bit about my background, share that with you. And then after about 15 minutes or so, I will open the floor for questions, and I hope to be able to share with you as much as possible. It's a bit hard sharing about 30 years of my life in about 30 minutes, but I will try my best. Every time I speak, it comes out different, and I don't go in a chronological order, so you really have to pay attention. Now, I'm one of 5 children, and I'm the oldest child. I come from a simple family background. My parents were great parents, hardworking people. They weren't wealthy. They weren't connected politically, nor part of any rabbinical dynasty. But my parents were very amazing in developing in us, their children, this sense of that we have great potential. We knew that we had a lot of things that we were capable of doing. And my mother had a rule. And my mother, I was the oldest. It was Ruchie, Simi, Chavi, Fegi, we're 4 girls. And my brother was born after I was married. In fact, my mother and I were pregnant at the same time. We took Lamaze together. So she's my best friend. But anyhow, when we were growing up, she told us, girls, you could do anything you want to do, so long as it isn't illegal, immoral, or against the Torah. So even though we grew up in an ultra-Orthodox Hasidic home, we never felt like we were oppressed. We never felt like there was something that we wanted to do and we couldn't do. We knew that the world was wide with opportunities, but we just had our rules that we had to follow. And my father, he was amazing. He instilled in us this idea that we were wonderful kids, but he was very strict in one thing: derech eretz, midos, character traits, behavior. You had to behave, and we had to know table manners. And when he would go to school for a PTA, the first question he would ask was, how does my daughter behave? Grades were really irrelevant to them. My parents just focused on doing what's right and standing up for what's right. So that's how I grew up. I got married when I was 19 years old. I went to Beis Yaakov Elementary School, Beis Yaakov High School, Beis Yaakov Seminary. And back when I graduated high school, college wasn't even an option for the Hasidic girls, even the Hasidic boys. And I didn't want to ever be a revolutionary or a rebel. I wanted to follow my community standards and do what's the right thing. So when I was 18, I got engaged to a great young boy, and I wanted him to continue learning in the Talmudic Academy. So I was going to continue working and support him while he would study Torah. So when I was in high school, I made a calculation to myself that I wanted to graduate high school and get a good job. And since college wasn't an option, I knew that I was going to have my high school degree to get me a job. So my school offered a course called legal stenography in our senior year of high school. It was a very hard course. We were prepared to work as legal secretaries. And I took the course, worked very hard. And when I was 17 years old, when I graduated high school, and by the way, if you figure out how old I am by the time I finish speaking, it's perfectly fine. So I graduated at the age of 17, got a job as a legal secretary, kept getting better jobs and better jobs. And I was really, really very happy doing what I was doing. And it wasn't until I turned 30 and I was working for lawyers that were younger than me when it suddenly hit me that this is just not going to be enough for me, that I can't be a secretary my whole life. And when I was a girl in school, now I'm jumping back and forth, everybody, so please pay attention. When I was in school, I told you I was an average student. I wasn't the valedictorian. I wasn't the class GO president, just an average kid in the class. In fact, a couple of years ago, when my youngest daughters, by the way, I have 6 children, Baruch Hashem, 3 boys and 3 girls, in that order, just like the Brady Bunch, that old TV show, except just one husband. So when my youngest, they're a set of twin girls, were in their senior year in high school, I went to the PTA. And the teacher looks at me and she says, "Hey, Ruchie, don't you recognize me? I was in your sister's class." I looked at her, I said, "Yeah, you look familiar." And she says to me, "Did you become a lawyer?" I said, "Yes, I did." She says, "You know, come to think of it, I don't remember you being one of the smart girls." And she was right. I was just an average girl in the class. So people, when they hear of what happened to me years later, they can't understand how it happened. And at the end of the day, you don't have to push your kids to succeed in school. You have to encourage them. You have to make them feel that they could succeed and they can accomplish, and you'd be surprised what they can achieve. So I grew up in the 1970s and 1980s, and we were lucky because kids were valued for being kids, just for that alone. So I was the oldest grandchild of Holocaust survivors. And my generation proved that Hitler, may his name be obliterated, was wrong. That the Jewish people are eternal, because not only are there Holocaust survivors who have children, but now there are grandchildren. So my generation, we went to school. All you had to do was breathe. You inhaled oxygen, you exhaled carbon dioxide, and the teachers called us Taya Kind, dear precious children. So, when I speak, I'll throw in every so often some words of Yiddish or Hebrew, and I'll translate it. Okay, if I forget, please remind me. Now, when I go around speaking, I really like to tell people what is my main theme, because I really have a theme. I really have a message that I really want to convey to people who come to hear me speak, and that is, we're all different, and we all have different standards in Judaism that connect us to God, to Hashem. And whatever your standards are, whatever connects you to God, hang on to it. Because as you travel through life, there always are challenges, and there'll be people who will test you. And sometimes when I speak to young girls that are just graduating high school or college, I tell them, don't think for one second that to succeed in the outside world, whether it's the corporate world or the medical world or the legal world, don't think for one second that you have to compromise your religious Jewish standards, because you don't. And if my story teaches you anything, it's just the opposite. That when you remain steadfast in your commitment to God, and you don't compromise those values, and you hold them dear and precious, not only will it not hold you back, but it will propel you forward. Because people respect people with standards. Everybody wants to look up to somebody else. And when you do that, people will respect it, and they won't let you let go. So when you have your standards, people will respect it. And then when you happen to be working in an office and there's some sensitive corporate secret, Who do you think they will trust if not the person who, even when no one is looking, is only eating kosher? Even when no one is looking, is going home to light the candles for Shabbos on time? And the message they're getting is you're a person of honesty, loyalty, integrity, commitment, and so on. So people always ask me, Ruchie, who is your role model? Who's your role model? Was it RBG? Was it Golda Meir? And I'll say no, none of the above. There was this woman who was a seamstress who lived in Krakow, Poland between the two world wars. Her name was Sarah Shanira. Sarah Shanira is known as the mother of the Beis Yaakov movement. She was a seamstress who saw, at that time in Eastern Europe, the winds of all the new ideologies were sweeping across Europe. Whether it was communism, Marxism, socialism, it was sweeping through, and the Jewish families were struggling because their children were straying from the path of Torah, especially the girls. Now, back in those years, everybody went to public school, and after public school, the boys went to yeshiva, but the girls didn't. It was expected that whatever they needed to know about Judaism, they were going to learn at home in the kitchen with their mothers. And Sarah Shanira said, no, Jewish daughters need a proper Jewish education. Now, when I went to school in Beis Yaakov, they taught us about Sarah Shanira, mother of Beis Yaakov, but they never told us that she was considered a revolutionary and had opposition. So when people tell me now, Ruchie, how can you consider yourself a Hasidic woman when you have such a public persona and people are listening to you and looking at you in a public setting? How can you reconcile that? So I quote Sarah Shanira. She told her students that a Jewish daughter has to always wear a dress with two pockets. In one pocket, you carry the verse from Tehillim, from Psalms, Kol Kfuda Bas Melech Pnima. King David writes that the beauty of a woman, her majesty, is what's within. So whatever modesty means to you, she told her students, carry it in your heart with your head up high. But in your other pocket, you carry the verse, also from Psalms, Eis la'asos laHashem. There comes a time to act, and a time to act for God because people have trampled Torah values. And she said, girls, you will become leaders and people will follow you. So in a time when there were no smartphones, no cell phones, no copy machines, she was teaching young Jewish girls to become teachers, to travel to the far-flung shtetls of Poland and to teach other Jewish girls. Now, people always ask me, how did this affect your children? And I have to tell you, when I started my journey of going to school, I was 30 years old. And at that time, my 3 sons were born. And during my first semester of college, my first daughter was born. Now, when I made this decision to go back to school, we were 30 years old. I remember sitting down with my friends, and I said to my friends, I decided, that's it. I cannot be a secretary my whole life anymore. I'm going to go to school. I really want to become a lawyer. And my friends laughed at me. Ruchie, how long will this take you? Said I made a calculation. College part-time will take me 6 years. Law school part-time 4 years. So it will take me 10 years. And my friends laughed. Ruchie, we'll be 40 years old then. Well, guess what happened? 10 years later, we all turned 40 and I was a lawyer, thank God. So my story is one of not listening to naysayers. When you want to do something, you need to know there's always going to be people telling you it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Ruchie, you'll never make it through college. And if you do, you'll never get into law school. And if you do, you'll never pass the bar. And if you do, you'll never be able to have a law practice. Who is going to come to a Hasidic woman from Borough Park who's a lawyer? And I said, even if I don't have one single client, I cannot see myself being a grandmother in the rocking chair telling my grandchildren, well, Bobby really could have been a lawyer, but she didn't. I had to at least try. And what I've learned is that you have to try and believe in God. And you just never know how your dreams can come true. You don't know what your potential is if you don't even try it. So whatever the naysayers say, don't believe them. Now, let me tell you why I decided after I became a lawyer to eventually run for judge. So when I was a little girl, my mother's sister married her husband, my uncle. He passed away a couple of years ago, but his name was my Uncle Dovi, and he was at that time going to go to law school. And as I was growing up, I watched Duvi go to law school, become a lawyer, then clerk for a judge, and then become a judge. And I always said to him, Duvi, I want to become a judge one day. And as I was going through my journey in higher education, Duvi was my mentor. I spent hours in his courtroom watching him, and he was so proud of me. I always told everybody in court, this is my niece. She's got 6 kids. She's going to law school. Well, in about 2016, Duvi called me up and said, Ruchie, I'm going to be retiring this year. And if you still want to be a judge, you have to run from my original seat. My uncle Duvi started out as a civil court judge and then worked his way up to state Supreme Court. And I said, run for judge? My goodness gracious, my husband is tolerating so much. How's he going to handle an election? So it was around Sukkot time, this time of year, and I had to break the news to my family because let's face it, ladies, we cannot succeed if we don't have the support of the men in our lives. And you know, I'll just digress for a moment and talk about my husband, because lots of people make a big deal about me being the first Hasidic woman, and they go on, but the truth is, my husband is the real trailblazer, because he was the first Hasidic man who not only supported his wife through this campaign. And not only did he go and finance my campaign, because I maxed out all of his credit cards, he didn't rest until he went to all the rabbis and got their endorsements and ran around to shul. I remember the first day that we were able to get signatures because I had to have a petition drive to get on the ballot. He ran to shul with this like piece of paper in his coat pocket, never left home without it. He comes home the first day of the petitioning process. Ruchie, he says, I went to daven in Bobov and I came home with 40 signatures. I said, Svidovid, one davening of Shachris, you have 40 signatures? I think I have a good chance to win this campaign. You think I ran for this campaign? It was the Freier family. You should have seen my kids, my boys, with the long side curls, the long black coats and the black felt hats. They were on the street corners. Vote for Freier. This is my mama. It's my mother. People will say, your mother, like who could she possibly be? They took my palm cards and they translated it into Yiddish. They made a Yiddish campaign song and said, Mommy, we're going to put your palm cards in every synagogue in Borough Park. Babov, Satma, Purpa, Bells, Vish. Should I go on? You get the drift? And then, Mommy, we're going to put it where the men read. We're going to put it in the bathrooms. They didn't leave a stone unturned. And then I eventually did win this campaign. I won the election, and it was a 3-way race because my opponents, now, who are my opponents? Let me tell you a little bit about Ezras Nashim. Ezras Nashim is an all-women's volunteer EMT corps in Borough Park. So we're female emergency medical technicians who respond to calls from other women. Now, this started when I got involved in helping a group of women about 9 years ago. So why did I get involved helping this group of women? Because when I started law school, that was the first time that the naysayers really frightened me. Because all along my journey, when they say, I'll never make it, I'll never make it, I'll never make it, and they told me that if you go through higher education, you're going to compromise your Hasidic values. You won't remain as committed to your Judaism. So that worried me because this is the first time I would go into a very liberal academic environment. When I went to college, it was an all-girls college. You see, Hasidim, we don't change. But when opportunities change, then we go with the flow. So when I was 30 years old, colleges opened up that would allow me to go to school, separate classes for men and women, no classes on Shabbos, no homework to be done, and no classes during the holidays. But when I started law school, I said, you know, maybe they're right. How am I going to withstand all the challenges? So I made my deal with God. God, help me get through law school and not compromise my standards. And when your children come to me for legal help, I will help them. And God wasted no time in testing me. Shortly after I graduated, I got involved with youth at risk in the Chassidic community, primarily boys. And then a few years later, a group of women asked me to advocate for them because they wanted to join the very respected all-male EMT corps here in Brooklyn. And I said, if I went to law school for this cause alone, it was worth it. And that has been my most challenging project of all my years. I confronted intense opposition. The opposition went so far as to even find someone to run against me for a judge. They found an Orthodox man and they financed his campaign and he ran against me. And then when the people saw that the Orthodox vote's going to be split, a non-religious Jewish woman said, let me jump into the race also. It was a three-way race. And with God's help, I got over 40% of the vote. Now I think I'll take a short break and take your questions so I can continue the rest of my story, but focusing on your questions.
You know, Ruchie, Judge Freier, I have heard so many interviews with you, and I just get emotional every time. I think you've got such an incredible story, so powerful, so many messages. It just really makes me emotional. And there's some questions that came through. What inspires you to stay true to your values?
So I had phenomenal teachers when I went to Beis Yaakov, that's Beth Jacobs School for Girls, and they taught us that we're all created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God, and that we have incredible potential. We just have to try and believe that God can make our wishes come true. And you know, it says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmar, you don't have to finish the task, but you're not exempt from even trying. So I grew up in an environment where in school I was taught that we have incredible potential as Jewish children. And I came from a home where I was told that we were great because we were survivors' grandchildren. We were great because we were born. So in that environment growing up, I'm just a product of my upbringing.
And can you share with us some challenges you have as an Orthodox woman and being a judge?
So I'll share with you a couple of stories, even going back, even before I became a judge, so you can get the gist of what it was like for me. So, and I just have to give my disclaimer because I want everyone who's hearing me to understand that when I share my stories of what it's like being a Hasidic woman going through the outside world, I don't expect anybody to take upon themselves my Hasidic standards, because every community has their own standards. And what I do in Borough Park is different than my cousins in Williamsburg or my cousins in Kiryas Joel and Monroe. So it would be ridiculous. But let me just share with you what it's like. So let's talk about the concept of Shmirat Haloshon, guarding your tongue, of the things that you speak. So when I was in law school, I was looking for an internship. And I'll tell you why. I had been a legal secretary and did a lot of real estate work. And I was hoping that when I would become a lawyer, I would become a real estate lawyer, which I eventually became. But the naysayer said, who is going to come to you for real estate? You know, the real estate people, the investors, they're the hackers, the cloppers. They're not going to come to some Hasidic woman from Borough Park. So I figured, you know what, they probably won't. But maybe the mature population will come to me to do their wills, their estate planning, you know, some trust work. Let me learn some trust and estates. So I said, I'm going to do an internship. And I looked for a lawyer that was near the law school, and I found one. I went knocking on his door one day on my lunch break, and I said, hi, I'm a student at Brooklyn Law School. I'd like an internship here. And I got the job. So every so often, I would come once a week, come from class, go to the law firm, and I would do the internship there. Now, the attorney that I was working for did trusts and estates, a very fine, soft-spoken man. But the way the firm was situated is several lawyers shared a suite. And my desk that was assigned to me was right opposite the office of a litigator. I don't have anything against litigators. I think they're great people. But they also have a certain way of speaking, and there's a certain amount of, I don't want to say, it's not arrogance, but they have to advocate. They have to fight for their clients because they are litigators. So I was sitting right opposite this litigator, very good guy, very good lawyer, but he had a mouth that I'm sure he didn't realize that what we in Borough Park call curses is the way he just spoke. And I'm sitting across his office and I'm listening to him talk. And I think to myself, this is terrible. This is terrible. And I remembered that my teachers in Beis Yaakov taught us, girls, when you graduate these 4 brick walls and you go out and you go into the big wide world, you need to know to hold on to your values, because there are going to be 3 levels out there. When you're going to go outside into an environment that's not appropriate for a Beis Yaakov girl, you'll find yourself in 3 different levels. Now, first, you'll hear something wrong and you'll say, this is terrible. This is not for me. It's terrible. But if you do nothing, you're going to go to the next level. The next level is you're going to get accustomed to it and it won't bother you anymore. And if you don't stop it and leave that environment, the 3rd level is you're going to enjoy and participate in that behavior. So I said, I have to stop this. What am I going to do? So I went and I knocked on his door. Let's call him Sam. I said, Sam, I need to tell you something. I really have to apologize. It's not about you, it's about me. I said, I come from Borough Park, and the way that you speak, I'm sure you don't think there's anything wrong, and it probably isn't. But for me, where I come from, we call those curses, and it really bothers me. Before I even finished my sentence, big booming guy, he gets up and he says, everybody, when she's here, watch your language. And every time I walked in, he would announce in his booming voice, here she comes, everybody. You got to watch what you say. So one day I decided I have to outsmart these guys. So I come in the next day with a gold pushka, the charity box. And I said, guys, I have to train you. I'm going to offer you a disincentive. This is going to be on my desk. And anytime anybody curses, you put a quarter in the pushka, in the charity box. And then when it gets filled up, I will send it to the poor people in Israel. So one guy, Steve, takes out of his pocket a $10 bill. Rachel, he says, here's an advance. And that became the joke. And every time I walked in, they would laugh at me. But the joke is that they respected me and they understood. So I was taught that if you want people to respect you, don't hide and shy from your values. Be upfront, be open, and share it with them, and they'll respect it. You know, when I was working as a legal secretary in one of the big firms in Manhattan, it was the summertime. And I didn't know about Dress Down Friday. Anybody here know about Dress Down Friday? Well, Dress Down Friday, I learned, is during the summer months in the large corporate firms, they want to make the employees feel like they're not working so hard. So you can dress down. You don't have to wear your starched shirts and your ties. I mean, there were some rules. You couldn't come in shorts and flip-flops, but you could just come in casually, and then you won't feel like you're working so hard on Friday. Now, I come from Borough Park, and in Borough Park, we like to dress up, not down. Every Friday, I opened up my closet. What should I wear today? What should I wear? It was such a headache. Well, back then, I had this denim jean dress, and I knew that for my Borough Park community, my sleeves were borderline. It was the kind of sleeves where they covered my elbows, but if I raised my hand, it rolled down. Now, let me tell you, since that time, there's something called a shell that we wear, and this revolutionized the way we dress. When shells came out about 10 years ago, they introduced these little t-shirts. They come in every color and every size. And now I could buy my shells and I could buy clothing anywhere. I don't have to worry about sleeves and necklines anymore. Well, back then we didn't have these shells. And I'm sitting at my desk and I figured, this is Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. And now I'm going to be wearing my dress. Who cares? So I'm sitting at my computer and I'm typing. And one of the young attorneys that I was assigned to work for, who happened to be Jewish but not observant, comes to my desk and he says to me, Rachel, I see your forearms. And I want you to know that when I was in school, we had these modesty teachers, the modesty monitors who would check our hemlines, our necklines, our sleeves. We didn't always like them, but they never impacted me like this Jewish, non-observant lawyer impacted me, because the message that he gave me was, I know that you are religious. And I know you dress modestly, and I'm sure you don't know that your sleeves are too short. You know what happened? I went home and I threw out that dress. And I learned that when you tell people that you have standards, they don't let you let go because they want you to maintain those standards. So that's something that I learned along my way. I learned that just be proud and share what you do and why you do it. And you just may get respect for it. That's a long answer for one question.
That's absolutely beautiful. And that's so true. And that's a very, very powerful message, because I think each person, every level that they are, have these conflicting situations all the time. We're all different. We all have different standards, and sometimes we lower our standards just to fit in, because it just makes us feel more comfortable. That's a very, very powerful message. We've got lots and lots of questions coming through. The other question I had, which is, do you ever feel like your judgment in court contradicts or affects your Jewish values, or vice versa? Your Jewish values affects your judgment in court?
You know, I love to say that I love my job, and I think I have the best seat in the house, and I'll tell you why. In America, when the judge sits on the bench, above the judge are the words, "In God we trust." And every time I get into the courtroom, that puts me into perspective. There is a God above me, and everything I do is controlled by God. So I think, and I would say, that my religious values actually help me. Don't conflict me, they help me. The values of emes, truth, tzedek, justice. The Torah tells us you should pursue justice. And when I studied constitutional law when I was in law school, I couldn't help but see how much of constitutional law and how much of the vision of our founding fathers here in America just parallel Torah values. So I would say it helps me, it guides me, and ultimately it's secular law that I have to decide upon. So it's not the Torah law, it's secular law. So with that in mind, I don't have any conflicts. But just you should know that if there ever would come a case where there is a conflict of interest, and that happens if there's somebody who would come to court in front of me who's a former employer or a former employee, or certain levels of relationship and family, I would have to recuse myself. And that has already happened once or twice, that I had to recuse myself. So if any judge ever feels conflicted for any reason whatsoever, we are supposed to recuse ourselves from that case.
Beautiful answer. I love the way you said that you have the best seat in the house. It's really so powerful. Beautiful. One of the questions that people ask, how would you answer to, do you think that religious women are subservient to their husbands? Do you
Which religion? Which religion?
Jewish religious women. What would you answer to that? One of the questions that came through. Well, it doesn't seem true for you, so that says a lot.
I can only speak from my experience, right? My family, what I've seen, my community, right? I'm going to speak from my experience. So starting from me, I'm not second class. I hope I don't look second class, but I don't feel second class. And I don't think Judaism holds women as second class citizens whatsoever. I think I would even argue that our role is very important in Judaism, because what determines your Jewish identity is who your mother is. So we are the ones that God entrusted us to carry on Judaism. So I think women are extremely important and critical in the grand scheme of Judaism. That's not to say that you will find pockets of men in any community who have personality disorders and try to use religion to wield power. But that's not part of the religion. That's a personality disorder. Religious values are such that women and men, we each have our roles. God created us for a special purpose. We have our roles. And I love my role as a Jewish woman. I love the mitzvahs that God has given me. I love baking challah. I love lighting the Shabbos candles. I love raising my children. And I love being a grandmother for my children. So I don't find that whatsoever. If anybody feels differently, take it up with them. But my experience has not been that way.
I'm totally with you, because I often get that question as well. And I think often religious Jewish women get that question, and I'm totally with you. I feel on the contrary. I feel like often the women are such a powerful effect in any environment, whether it's a shul, a Chabad house, or in your case, they've got equal influence, if not more than the men, because as partners, we can do so much. And on the contrary, I always say that we're the CEOs in the organization just as much as the men. So, but at the same time, we love our role as mums, as grandmothers, or whatever it takes. So it's not a contradiction, but on the contrary. So
I think the question stems from because in the secular ideology of feminism, there's this big push, and the word is equality. And sometimes those lines get blurred because I am in favor of women and men getting equal pay for the same job. And I feel very strongly that women have incredible power and skills, and I'm all for empowering women. But when it comes to the Torah and the mitzvos of the Torah, there are separate mitzvos for men and separate for women. So that's where ideologies get blurred, because I don't know how to distinguish value, what we're worth as women, and what our roles are. And in fact, this is the reason why I'm such a strong proponent of the Ezras Nashim movement, because here was a group of men who were telling me that I couldn't be an EMT because I'm a woman and a Hasidic woman. And man, they pressed the wrong button. The worst thing to do was tell me that I can't do something because I'm a Hasidic woman. And I told them, maybe not only will I do it, but I may be better than you. So that's how the whole Ezras Nashim movement got started, because originally I was just going to help these women get accepted into the Hatzalah organization. I never planned to become an EMT and then a paramedic and the director. That just evolved because it became so important to me. How dare a small group of men say that Jewish women can't do this? In fact, I would say, this is my job. When did men usurp our territory of helping women in labor? Let's open up the Bible. Who were the ones that were helping women give birth in Egypt? It were the midwives. They were not mid-husbands. It wasn't Moses and his father. It was Yocheved and Miriam. So here are a group of men saying, women, no, you can't help women in labor. Only us men can do it. Oh, really? Like, where did that come from? And they said, oh, this is, and then look what they did. They went to the media and they said, this is part of Rachel Freier's radical feminist agenda. Now, that's a very bad word in Borough Park. And the media was like all after me. They all called me. They wanted to meet this radical feminist. And I said, I'm not a feminist. I'm just a Hasidic woman who believes in the power of women. And I said, this is not about women's rights. It's just that most of the time women are right, especially when it comes to our medical care. So you try to push those wrong buttons, tell me that us women can't do something. Big mistake. We are not second class. We're very capable. We can do a lot. We can have babies every year. We could raise our children. What you Chabad women do is unparalleled. Just incredible go-getters, doers. You're the ones that Yiddishkeit is standing on, right? Judaism depends on women like us.
True. I'm just curious, in your community being such an insular community, are there many women like you? Are your daughters following in your footsteps? So what does it look like now that you are a judge, you have you've do so many things, you've done the Ezras Nashim. Is it becoming a popular stand? Like, how does the community respond to that?
So it's interesting. First of all, you have to remember that when I became a judge, it only happened because I won the vote of my community. So they're the ones that really get credit. It's not for them voting for me. So the fact that I won is just a testament to the fact that I have the trust and the vote, no pun intended, of my community. And yes, I think that it's not only the women that are now understanding that the world is open with opportunity, but even the men now see that they could remain Hasidic and remain traditional and keep the garb. I always tell them, don't think you need to take off your black hat. You don't. Go in for the interview. When I was in law school, one of the best professors was Professor Aaron Tversky. And he is a Hasidic man with a long gray beard, and he's a brilliant legal scholar. And I said, you can be a law professor. You could do anything, and you just wear your Hasidic garb and just be proud of who you are.
That's actually beautiful, because there's a lot of misconception about that, and people misinterpret it. So it's beautiful to hear that. Now, I know you are so super busy, and sometimes I don't know how you put so much on your plate, but can you tell us a bit more about the teens at risk that you're on, besides the Ezras Noshim, besides being a judge, besides being a mom and a grandmother and all the other things? How many hours in a day do you have? Most of us have 24, but I'm not sure about you.
All right, so the Kids at Risk program I'm not as busy with that anymore, because I, thank God, was able to help a yeshiva get started about 6 years ago. And that yeshiva really took in a lot of the boys that were falling to the wayside. But every so often, certain cases come before me, and I do get involved. And that was, and the way that started was, it was just on one of my trips that I had gone to Israel with. And I met a woman there who told me that she came to pray because her son was being expelled from many different yeshivas, and he's starting to really exhibit behaviors that were antithetical. And I said, I'm going to help you. And when I started to help what turned out, what started out as being an effort to help one woman, just mushroomed to a bunch of kids coming to me. And what I realized is that I didn't have enough patience when they would come and talk to me, because these kids would cry. And I realized these aren't bad boys. They're making bad decisions because they have been traumatized. They have been misunderstood by their teachers and by their parents. And when I learned more about them, I became very outspoken. And then slowly but surely, the men started to get a window of what's happening here. And then more programs opened up that were run by the men. And then the yeshiva opened up that I was very instrumental with. And that was really a big game changer. And you know what I learned from that? Very interesting. You know, there's an expression in Yiddish, was men tit vayener, tit men farzich. When you do a mitzvah and you think you're helping somebody else, you're going to find out one day that you really helped yourself. So I ran for civil court, and I won the election. And I don't know how you have the court system in Australia, but here we have civil law and we have criminal law. So civil law is when people sue each other, and criminal law is when somebody commits a crime, it's the state that sues the person. I won the election to civil court. 2 weeks before my term started, I found out that my first assignment was in Brooklyn criminal court. And I said, criminal court? It's supposed to be a joke. I'm Hasidic. I don't watch movies. I don't know about crime. What am I going to do in criminal court? Don't worry, Judge. We're going to teach you. Judge school was 3 days. So I'm sitting on the criminal court bench, and I'm seeing these young defendants come in front of me. Most of them were from the inner city. Most of them were from the lower strata of the community. And I'm looking at these kids with their handcuffs and the jumpsuits. And I'm looking at them. And when I look into their eyes, I see the same thing I saw when I looked into the eyes of these young Hasidic boys that were in my office. And I was able to relate to these defendants. And I would talk to them the same way I spoke to these young boys. It's not your fault who your parents are. You can't blame yourself for that. But don't destroy your future. You have so much potential. Roll up your sleeves, work hard, believe in yourself. And I would talk to these defendants. And I had grown men cry in my courtroom and say, Your Honor, no one ever told me these things before. And then the prosecutor would say, but wait a second, Your Honor, what about the victim? What about the injuries? We have photos I'm sure you don't want to see. And I would say, I'm a paramedic. I want to see those photos. So there it was, my first 2 years on the bench. My volunteer work at the Kids at Risk program and my volunteer work as emergency medicine volunteer is what actually helped me get through those 2 years in criminal court. So whatever you do, when you do a mitzvah, you should know that you're really going to benefit yourself one day from that mitzvah. So that's what it was like doing that program. It was very meaningful, and it was just a real big eye opener for me. Whenever I see these kids, I tell people, you have to know there's a story. It's not just a kid who wants to be bad. There's a story there. Just open your heart and listen to the story.
Sorry, it took me a second. That's a very emotional message, and you know, you're volunteering your time. It's just so powerful for anybody out there who has a spare moment. It doesn't sound like you had a lot of spare moments, but you took that time, and look what it did for them, and look what it did for you in your career, which you wouldn't have expected. And it really was a turning point. Judge, do you mind sharing with us a few anecdotes that you have in court, that obstacles that come as a Jewish woman, as an Orthodox woman?
In court? So
In
actually, in court, it happens to be not so complicated. In court now, it's much easier. First of all, we all wear these big black robes. So dressing is not a problem anymore. I think that they're the most modest, theistic attire anybody could wear, loose, flowing black robes. And everybody knows that I'm Hasidic, so it's not like it's like something that they have to question. They know that I'm Hasidic, but most people can't even tell that I'm covering my hair, that I wear a wig, and I'm open about that. The only thing that could come up is the handshaking thing. So let me talk about the handshaking rule. So in Borough Park, Hasidic men and women don't shake hands. We don't touch each other unless we're related, but closely related. And for social purposes, we don't have any physical contact. And it's a very smart rule, let me tell you. It really has kept me out of trouble. And I'll share with you a little story of the handshake rule. So, you know, we call that negia, touching, physical contact. So at one point, when I was already a practicing lawyer, and in the beginning, when I started my law practice, I did end up having real estate clients. And I was doing a real estate closing. It was a commercial refinance. And my husband happened to have been the mortgage broker, and my clients were all Hasidim. And the closing took place in a corporate law firm in Long Island. And the bank attorney was a nice Irish Catholic, and he knew me, he knew my husband. He walked into the conference room, you just saw black, all the Hasidim wearing black suits. And he comes in, let's call him John. John comes into the closing, and he starts to shake everyone's hand. Then he comes to me with his hand stretched out. And I said, John, you know I can't do that. And he gives me this big hug. And he says, oh, Rachel, I'm so sorry, I forgot. So ever since then, when that handshake thing comes up, I always repeat that story. And you know what? People understand. In fact, when COVID came and people stopped shaking hands, they say, oh, we learned from Judge Freier not to shake hands, you know, how you could still be friendly without shaking hands. So, you know, these are things that, you know, you think that, oh, it's going to be so odd, it's going to be so weird. Don't ever feel that way. Teach people, explain to people, and you know, good people really want to learn. They want to hear, and if you do that, you can't go wrong.
It's so true. I can so relate to that. I think we get it all the time, and when we get that big beer hug, and they realize afterwards that I often don't know how to respond, or they don't know how to respond, and I try to break that awkward moment by going, as long as my husband's not around, he can't see me. So
That's funny. I had once a meeting when I was also doing a real estate deal, and it was a real estate property that was in upstate New York. If you ever been to New York, upstate is like the country. It's like much more rural up there. And there, in one building, you have the town hall, city hall, everything is in one building. Here in the city, you have a building department is one big building, and the health department is a building, but there everything was one room. And I was dealing with the Sullivan County tax collector, and he was Jewish, grew up in, you know, in a non-observant neighborhood, but he was very, very proud to be Jewish. And every time I would meet him, we would have these philosophical conversations. And one day I walked into his office and he closes the door. And I explained to him, I said to him, Joe, I need to tell you something, that when I'm with you alone in the room, that door can't be closed if it's locked from the outside. Those are the rules of yichud, seclusion. And he looks at me and says to me, "You know, Rachel, it is such a pleasure working with you because there's this thick black line between us. And I know I will never go over that line." And I came home and I told my husband, could you imagine how lucky we are? How many people have problems of being accused of doing something, even if it was years ago? People have lost nominations, have lost elections because accusations come up from people that decades ago they did something that was inappropriate. Said, look at these rules that were given to us through the Torah thousands of years ago, which they don't hold us back, they protect us. They protect us like wearing seatbelts. Get to your destination safely.
That's beautiful. You know, there's so many questions coming through and we're running short in time. This is my question to you. Now with the elections coming up next week, we've never had a Jewish president. We've never had a female president. Is that next for you?
I was going to tell you I can't take political questions, but actually I love the law. I love law, and I would love to see with Hashem's help that I should be able to rise up the legal ladder in the higher courts. That's what I would really love.
That's incredible. You have such a powerful message, standing up, standing strong, remaining true and strong to your values, no matter what situation comes at you. And you're an incredible, influential woman. So I don't know why they put you in the top 50. As far as we're concerned, you're top. Thank you so much. Have a great week ahead. And hopefully COVID eases for all of us. You have a healthy winter. We're going into summer.
Yeah.
So if the borders open, it's definitely an option to come. Let us know now. You have our contact details. We'd love to host you again in real life. So thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure every single one of you enjoyed it. Powerful message. And be safe. All the best.
Thank you so much. All be safe.
And if
anybody has a follow-up question, feel free to email me. It's judgefreier@gmail.com. If you could spell judge, you could spell Freier, you'll get me. I love feedback and I love Australians. So just send me a line and have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation.